Everybody. My name is Jose Luis Valenzuela, and I'm the artistic director of the Latino Theater Company. Latino Theater Company feels strongly about the events which have taken place recently and historically affecting people of color, and in particular the Asian community. It is a responsibility to make our audience aware of the long-standing relationship we had with our Asian colleagues, and we share the same struggle of calling out white supremacy and hate. We invite you to a conversation where we can share information and understand how we can organize and continue to support our Asian brothers and sisters at this important time. Welcome and thank you very much for being with us. And now, John Lawrence Rivera, please.
Hello and good evening, everybody. I would love to first off have our land acknowledgement. So, Jose Luis, if you could start off with the land acknowledgement, please.
The Latino Theater Company acknowledges that the Los Angeles Theater Center stand on the traditional lands of the Gabrielino Tonga Nation. The Latino Theater Company pays our respects to the nation and other indigenous caretakers of these lands and waters, and to their elders who have lived here, who live here now, and who will live here in the future.
Thank you so much. And I would like to pass the conversation on to Leslie that would lead on something very special that we'd love to do.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you, Jose, for offering your platform to the Latino Theater Company of the Los Angeles Theater Center. Deeply appreciate your giving us the opportunity. And to our esteemed colleagues that are here with us. I just want to take a moment and invite us all into a moment of silence for the victims of the Atlanta shootings, the 6 Asian women and the 2 other victims. And I understand there is even someone who's still injured from those shootings. And we want to acknowledge, of course, the Chauvin trial going on, but to acknowledge the unjust murder of George Floyd and those who, the long list in the Black community that have been unjustly murdered. And of course, those in the AAPI community, Black community, Latinx community, Native Indigenous community who continue to suffer from hate and violence. And we also want to, of course, offer remembrance to the missing Indigenous women and those lives that have been lost from the newer members of our community coming as immigrants and refugees and who are currently detained in detention centers. So with that, a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. With that, I pass it back to you, John.
Thank you, Leslie. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to give us a little bit of a framework how we're going to have this conversation tonight. First of all, the main part of this conversation is really to figure out how we, as a community of artists and a community of audiences, can really support each other and how we can protect each other. I think it's very important to find ways that we can protect each other and take care of one another. So before we start with our questions, and hopefully we could be done with the conversation and some question and answer from our audience within the next hour. So that people can go on and have their dinner tonight and whatever else they have plans for this evening. Before we start the questions, I'm going to ask my colleagues, my friends in this group to introduce themselves, and just to make sure that everybody in watching our conversation have a little bit of information and sense of who you are and you know your part in our community. So I will start with Stephanie, and then after Stephanie, I will go to Snehal, and then Snehal to Leslie, and then Leslie to Jose Luis, and then myself. So Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Lau, and I'm a founder and producing artistic leader of Artists at Play. We're a small Asian American theater company located in Los Angeles, and we've been producing since 2011. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm zooming in from the San Gabriel Valley.
Great. Snehal?
Thank you, John. My name is Snehal Desai. I'm the producing artistic director of East West Players. We are based out of Little Tokyo here in Los Angeles. My pronouns are he, him, and I am coming to you from the land of the Tongva here in Los Angeles.
Leslie?
Thank you, John. Leslie Ichi, I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm zooming in, or actually StreamYarding in, from the unceded territories of the Occoquan peoples on Tlingit Ani, also colonially known as Juneau Douglas, Alaska. And I am the artistic director at Perseverance Theater, and currently have the honor and pleasure of serving as the board president of the Consortium of Asian American Theater Artists. And I would like to lift up that Stephanie and Snehal are actually board members on the CATA board as well. Yeah, thank you. Honored to be here.
Jose Luis? You're muted.
Sorry. I'm Jose Luis Valenzuela, the artistic director of the Latino Theater Company at the Los Angeles Theater Center in downtown Los Angeles. And thank you.
And I'm John Lawrence Rivera. I am the founding artistic director of Playwrights Arena. My pronouns are he, him, and our office and our theater and my home are in the ancestral lands of the Tongva Chumash people. Anyway, so to get started, I just wanted to have a conversation about individually, how have you been responding to the AAPI discrimination and hate? You individually and your theater in particular, how are you addressing some of that, some of the issues that are coming up in our communities? And anyone could start. Anyone who wants to start with that? Leslie? Stephanie, you want to start?
Sure, I can start. So March 16th, I had actually gotten my first vaccine shot. So I was really in a great place. I felt like, wow, things are, moving forward in the pandemic, and because vaccinations were starting to open up. And then that evening we heard about the Atlanta shooting. So it was a really emotional day for me personally in a lot of different ways. Very happy and glad on the one hand, and then on the other, just a lot of anger and frustration and confusion that evening that, was really hard to process. And I think a lot of people had a lot of feelings, and I was on, social media and chatting with our other producing leaders and associates of Artists at Play, and we just didn't know how to respond. And we really decided to take some time to think about our feelings. We have a lot of respect for individuals and organizations who are really able to take that anger and, really mobilize with it, right? And really put words into action immediately. I just have great respect for people who are really able to challenge those feelings. For us, we needed time to process. And one thing that we realized as the days and then eventually a couple weeks, 2 weeks went by, was that there were a lot of people very adamantly speaking out. And we really thought about what role do we have, what resources do we have, and also that's related to what we know that can help contribute to this very multifaceted fight against, anti-Asian violence, against anti-Black racism, against, just the overall systemic issues of white supremacy. And we really made a conscious choice to look at what are the kind of unique informational resources and learning resources that we can share that help demonstrate the humanity of our communities. A lot of people were talking about the personal violence that they were experiencing. And so we had a lot of stories like that already out there. But for us as a theater company, where our purpose is to tell the diverse stories of the Asian American community, to look at what are the new narratives about our experiences. We thought that the best thing that we could do was to continue telling and sharing those resources that help bring humanity, help bring different stories to us, so that we can help broaden perceptions and move away from stereotypes and yellow peril, you know, and model minority myth. Like, what are the things that actually make us three-dimensional people? So for us, that was what we felt that we could do as an organization.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I think we have the same thing for Playwrights Arena, because we have been centering and uplifting BIPOC, BIPOC stories for the last, I mean, since we've started it, 29 years ago. And I think one of the things that my board said right away in response to what's been happening is to really continue doing the work and not pulling back. It's really about trying to get them out there, and also to try and encourage some of our white allies in the theater to uplift those stories, because I think it's really important for those stories to be seen. And for me, it's a really good way of expressing and showing the audiences that the fullness and the humanity of every BIPOC story. Leslie or Snehal, anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I can go. So at like all of you, so March 16th was actually my second pandemic birthday. So I was I think it's I'm over pandemic birthdays, because last year everything shut down. This year we had so I'm okay skipping birthdays for a little while. But I like all of you, I think we were all reeling. This hits us in so many ways, and this has also all been building over the last year, right? I think the rhetoric of calling the coronavirus the China virus, you know what I mean, making it so pointed, has directly led to a ratcheting up of hate crimes. And this was the worst possible case kind of scenario. So at East West Players, we, like Stephanie was talking about, and you, John Lawrence, we also made resources available, directed folks. And then we had a panel conversation a couple days after. And we really wanted to center Asian American female voices, because there's so many intersectional issues, right? It wasn't just Asian Americans, it was Asian American women who were specifically targeted. And this ties to the exoticizing and the fetishizing of Asian American women, oftentimes through TV, film, and theater. And so we wanted to just provide a space for leading. We had folks who are both artists, we had academics, we had reporters, so a cross section of Asian American women of various backgrounds, speaking about their experiences, very poignantly and movingly talking about what they had gone through. And then we also relaunched we have our wonderful t-shirts that I'm here to hawk. But we did a special edition, which is Stop Asian Hate. And the proceeds from these will be split amongst a variety of Stop API Hate associated organizations. And we've sold 1,000 of these in a week. And it's both raising, I think we've learned a lot since last spring, right? I think there's a couple of things we know. When these moments happen, the most effective way to help support is money, right? Is cash. These organizations, these communities need that. So it's a way about doing that. It's a way about raising visibility. And then we also, Leslie is going to talk a lot about what Kata did, which I think is, what's great is so many different organizations mobilized in so many different ways. We partnered with AJ Raphael and also did a PSA. And we specifically for our PSA, wanted to target, we're at the intersection of theater and TV and film out here in LA, right? So there's a specific population that we hit. So we wanted to bring in those folks, and then we wanted to really make it personal stories, right? So we wanted to make it less, there have been previous other PSAs in the past that haven't really shared what experiences were like. And so we asked folks to submit that. So we have kind of done all of those things. And now, as Stephanie was talking about, we are looking at ways to activate around our artists and our storytelling. So I think as we move forward, what are plays, what are conversations, what are artists who are doing this work, and how can we, bring them front and center around these issues?
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Wow.
Leslie, anything you'd like to share?
Sure, thank you. It's an interesting question because
Leslie, anything you'd like to share?
sure. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I actually,
Yep.
thank you, good. A week before the Atlanta shootings, I had been accosted in our grocery store here in Juneau. And gratefully, my life wasn't threatened, but it was, just heavy. And it was in an aisle when I was alone. So, this is not the time to school somebody. So you just got out of there. And I went up to the grocery store checkout because I thought, if it's happening to me, it's probably happened to other people. I want to report it to the store manager. So a lot of the checkout people are Filipina. And so it turned into an affinity space. Oh, I know. And then it turned into relating, and I realized they're frontline workers. They're enduring all this all the time. So we did manage to report it to the store manager. And I hope that it did some good. You hope that resonates and they keep an eye out more for safety for people. But then I realized I had written a letter in our newsletter condemning the actions around George Floyd some time ago, and we had gotten some hate mail, right? And so during these recent months, we would take a stance around just being more equitable and inclusive, and we would get some hate mail. So I finally thought, I got to go to our board. I was working with our staff, and I went to the board and said, I had this situation occur. We've had this whole, like you were saying, Snehal, this last term with this former president who just refused to shift the language to coronavirus. And there's even images, snapshots now of where he actually would cross out the word corona-19 virus and put in Chinese flu or Kung flu. So it was absolutely intentional on his part to be offensive. And I said to the board, this is escalated now. And this is, again, before the shootings. I said, I need us. I'm a very visible Asian leader here. And we have a whole we have a history of it, very vast Asian community here. Samoan, Filipinos, Korean, Chinese, Hmong community, Japanese incarceration, descendants, survivors. I said, and I'm a visible leader. I'm sure if it's happening to me, it's happening to others. And immediately, gratefully, I didn't have to convince. They were like, we need to protect our people. So almost they were leading up to it. We've been doing ED&I work, and suddenly it's like they crossed that line into saying we have to be an anti-racist organization. We must be a social justice organization. And we've been working deeply with Alaska Native communities. And then when the shootings occurred, they were like, it is real. Like, not that your situation wasn't real, but this is so real. So it just sort of it made it deepen into the work at our theater. And then I knew as soon as those shootings occurred, Snehal and Stephanie know this, that I just got right on with actually TCG, Amelia Cachapero, and Adrian Bandu, who came right away and offered a little bit of funding from TCG, but they were very clear, we want this to be Kata AAPI led. And then we started to put together, we had an API group that was forming hundreds. We have over 400 emails on a shared Google Doc so that we can notify folks. And we've had 2 meetings, and there are at least 200 people there each time. And basically, we know now from activist movements that I'm also in with Suit for Solidarity, when we're in direct action, we also know to have healing space. We just have to roll like that now for self-care. So we've offered some healing spaces. We've also offered the ability to coordinate efforts and support each other. And then Kata will continue with offering with HowlRound Theater Commons a series on their sort of HowlRound network, if you will. And we'll work. I just had a meeting today with Hollaback, Dax Valdez, Filipino, who will offer us some information around training. And the Hollaback organization is offering free training. So thank you to your team at LATC for sharing that email. Please go there. There is free training and you can get it online. And one of the things that we're rolling with is that a bystander, upstander training is how we're going to come together in solidarity and help each other stand up and be upstanding for each other. So we'll be offering more around those trainings and more around trauma-informed self-care too. And then we'll host, I think, some solidarity building sessions as well. So looking forward to that and doing our part to bring our communities together, because we really are stronger together. The PSA that Kata was able to put out in concert with Snehal, with yours, at East West Players, over 50 artists donated their time to it. Elena Chang directed it. We had a wonderful editor, Olivia Oguma, and Bree Ang Schwartz was also coordinating that effort. And Tiffany Griffith was someone who helped with the graphics. So we just had a great team that came together quickly. And literally within that first week, we had that to say, we're strong. We felt we needed real representation, that we're here, it's not going away, and we're fighting it. Yeah.
I just want to echo.
Thank you so much. Great. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just want to echo. Yeah, Leslie took very decisive leadership, and I think particularly the PSA that Kata, oftentimes with PSAs, they're about educating folks about us, but there's also something about particularly the Kata one, which is a show of strength and community and solidarity, which is also empowering and healing for our community. So it's one of those things where they can all serve different purposes, and so I want to thank Elena and Leslie and everyone who worked on that, because there was something that was just heartening, that knowing, even though we're all so isolated, we're not alone. There is this very strong national community and presence that has been activated in this moment.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you for that, Sneha. I'll add too, we started a campaign called, granted it was kind of a little hashtag had a bad day. So you can go to our website and you can click on, and there's a Google form, and you can share maybe a bit if you have had an incident, please do. And it's actually in support of the hashtag Stop AAPI Hate. If you go to their website, you can report an incident. And we ask that you do. We know there are so many folks out there that for cultural reasons, all kinds of, thank you to your team again for posting that. There's so many reasons culturally, with the internalized oppression we've all carried over many generations, it can be difficult to feel that it's okay to tell the story. So we're encouraging folks, please, you can go to the Kata website for hashtag had a bad day and share your story. You can share it anonymously too. It'll help others feel encouraged to speak out. And certainly, please do go to hashtag Stop AAPI Hate and report your incident. They're keeping a national statistic, and it will help everyone to know the real impact of this hate that's going on. Yeah.
Thank you. And I also know that Snehal, didn't you do a town hall meeting right after? I think it happened right after the shooting. Did you? I remember you hosting something at East West Players, right?
Yeah, that was. It was like a town hall and panel conversation, and I think. It was one of those things where what was clear was folks needed that space, right? So it was both about educating and getting the word out, but it was also so clear that, in this time, we don't have our theaters, right? We don't have our spaces where we can physically bring people together and they can gather. And so, the next best thing was to be able to create some kind of virtual space where folks could also talk and ask questions, but also in the chats, I think a lot of folks spoke up about their own experiences as it was all happening.
Yeah. Great. And I know Stephanie is very active on Twitter and on Instagram. I think that, you know, when I follow her, I mean, there's a lot of information that she's always posting, and she has a very, I think their website also has a lot of resources. If anybody needs to go to their website, there's a lot of. Stephanie, can you share some of your, you know, some of those the information and where people can go and look at those things?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of our presence on social media, the credit goes to our other producing artistic leader, Julia Cho. She's really good with Twitter, and she definitely brings out the sass on Twitter. So that's the fun follow. It's AA Play on Twitter to follow artists at play. But yeah, a lot of the resources. So when we curated our resources, we wanted to think about what are the different entry points that people have to learn about people in general or storytelling, right? So we actually didn't provide theater resources. We looked at what are some of the mutual aid groups that support, you know, on the ground, grassroots support, you know, specific ethnic communities. We looked at movies, TV shows, books, poets, you know, just because we know that art in many different forms, right? Art educates in a way that, you know, hits those emotions. It's what brings empathy. So that was some of the things that we really tried to emphasize. One other thing that I'm particularly interested in is how youth learn about the different people and the differences in our world, because we do know that kids as young as 3 and 4 can identify people and sort people based on race and ethnicity. You've often heard 4-year-olds say, I don't play with girls, or I don't play with boys. So we know that kids start to develop these viewpoints when they're really young. So as someone, I have kids, I've been really involved in their schools, and it's really important to, if you have kids in your life, whether you're a parent or aunt or uncle, or, you know, you just have people, young people that you love, one of the ways that you can help is make sure that these young people, these kids are reading and learning about diverse stories. Because then if they are able to form and be educated on their own, then when they inevitably face racism or stereotypes out in the world, then they have their core values and their core information that they can fall back on, and they can say, no, that's wrong. You know, girls can be heroes, or, you know, neurodiverse people, neurodiverse kids are more than just, you know, can be more. Like, we can all be more. And that, I think that idea and that humanity can really be emphasized and planted in youth. And because of that, for Artists at Play, we've become more interested in what theater for young audiences can really do as a way to supplement schools, and what schools either don't have the time or resources to offer. And I know East West Players has had a really long history with their theater for young audiences. And I know Snehal is constantly doing some really great work that is really trying to broaden the type of stories and plays that are going into elementary and middle schools. And these are stories that kids really need to see to become like decent adults.
It's great. I want to make sure that we have enough time. Oh, go ahead. I just want to make sure that we have enough time for Q&A. But Snehal, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, you know, thanks, Stephanie, and echo, you know, the erasure of our community starts with, we're just not, you know, Asian American history is not taught. The impact that we have had on this country, you know, many of you have probably heard me tell this story, but when, you know, when I first came to LA, I went to some LAUSD schools, and when you would go in those classrooms with our Theater for Youth show, and you would ask, you know, name an Asian American you've studied at any point in K through 12, and LAUSD, more times than not a single hand would go up. And, it's the same also for if you ask, name a Latinx or Latino American you've studied besides Cesar Chavez, most times the students, we are just not in the history or the curriculum, and that washes out the deep roots that we have, you know what I mean, and the stake we have in this country. But one thing I also want to highlight is in this moment, the very interesting thing is these attacks are a lot of them, or the ones that are predominantly being reported, are happening in cities, right? In places that we think are liberal or our communities are safe, right? So it's Atlanta, it's New York, it's Oakland, it's the Bay Area, it's here in LA, and so there is something particular about that, these are cities that have a large Asian American presence, and yet folks feel very comfortable to target particularly women and particularly the elderly in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And don't fear or worry about retaliation. So I think,
right.
The bystander training is particularly key, because when you're in these moments, I think as people of color, we all know, when you're in these moments witnessing, everything it's like a car crash, slow motion, and you're going through so many things. And unfortunately, the pressure to address the situation is on the person who's either being attacked or the bystanders, right? All of that pressure goes on them, not on the person who's perpetrating the crime. And so I think any of those things that we can do to prepare yourself will help not only you, but our communities collectively.
Yes. So I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit into, do you know, or have you did you hear of, have you heard of any of the white institutions and how they are responding to this issue, and how are they shifting so that there is more understanding between cultures? I mean, Latino Theater Company is hosting this conversation, and that is, in a way, to me, is a way of non-Asian American companies trying to really, figure out what to do. And I just wondered if you have any examples. For instance, I know that there is a small theater company in Los Angeles, and their artistic director came up to me and said that they have been actively trying to shift their board of directors so that there will be more representation of Asian American board members in their group, and also trying to to cultivate more Asian American and also BIPOC actors in their membership. So those are, like, to me, I feel like that's a beginning step of how to really uplift and center those stories. And I just wondered if any of my colleagues and friends in the chat, that if you have heard anybody else doing that kind of work, because I know we as a community of Asian American leaders, I mean, we're already thinking about that. But what about the other theaters or other communities? What are they doing that you've heard of?
That's a really good question, John.
Because I think we need to I think we have to honor the people who are actually trying to do it. And I know there are a lot who are they make the statement, they get it out there, and then they just do their business. And that's the thing that's most frustrating for me. When even in the beginning, in the summer of last year, when Black Lives Matter was around, and everybody rallied around that, and we support Black artists, Black stories, and yet even through Zoom and through presentations after another, these white institutions are still doing white productions. And I'm going, what is happening? I thought we were shifting. And so it would be great if there are those examples, because I think I'm trying to actually, like, figure out if there are ways. And also, if you haven't heard, like, what could people do? What could people do to really elevate those stories and and elevate that the visibility, which I always feel is the thing that's like Snehal just said. It's not in the curriculum, it's not in the schools, and so how do we get that out there, and how do we encourage our non-BIPOC supporters to be able to tell those stories? What steps can they do?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can share that nationally, there's been a couple of theaters that have come forth to say, how can I support? And I'll be honest, I say, well, a couple of things. Take bystander training, because I'm sure as you want to get more inclusive in your staff and with your audience, they could be targeted. So take bystander training and check in with your actual AAPI colleagues and staff members or board members, because I'm learning that not many people checked in on this. How are you? Are you okay? What's happening? I know this is a lot. Just check in. We put that at the top of our statement. Before you read any further, please check in with any AAPI staff, community members, neighbors, board members. And then I said to them, we have a lot of training we want to do. We have self-care and trauma-informed care that we want to provide for our communities, and especially in the theater field. Because we are on the front lines telling those stories, and we absorb a lot, and we want to be leaders out front to support anti-racist and anti-oppression work. So I said, help us by finding donations. Donate to our theaters. We're underserved. We have historically been under-resourced and underfunded. And that will come out soon in APAC's report about how it's just not changing that way. And then I even put, there'll be a statement coming out soon in the next week, actually. Kata will put out yet another statement. If you are AAPI and you would like to sign that statement, again, you can go to our website, and there's a line there, and you can click on, and it'll give you a Google form to give you information, so we can add you to our statement if you'd like to be active that way. And then I encourage our communities to read that. They're very informational about who we are, what we stand for, and you start to understand how you can take actions to be in support of us. A second statement will come out by April 12th, when we have our first Howl Round episode. And this is one that you can sign on to endorse. And I know, Jose, I think I sent you an email, and you were wonderfully supportive right away with LATC. So, when you endorse something, also remember you want to be in alignment. So what actions do you need to take in order to support our cause and protect us, move forward with anti-racism training and awareness for all of our communities, the Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Pan-Asian, Pacifica, MENA, the Middle Eastern, North African, and Native Indigenous communities. If you injure or abuse one of us, you injure all of us. We're that connected. So our next statement will speak to how we condemn, and specifically how our theaters have been impacted over the years around marginalization. And so you help by giving us resource, and make sure you're asking funders, do I really need? I know folks who didn't take the PPP because they're so resourced that they knew it would leave more of the federal funding for those who actually need it. So that kind of assessment is also really, really important. Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. All right, we have a question. Any thoughts regarding coalition amongst individual AAPI communities and with BIPOC communities as a whole? Yes,
Okay.
John. Should we, Ivan, let's go back to that first question. Is this part of the same question? Yes. So any thoughts, individual AAPI, MENA communities and with BIPOC communities as a whole? Anyone want to take a stab at this? Hi, Patty Cachapero. How are you? I didn't even see who asked the question. Hi, Patty.
Hi, Patty.
I directed Patty's work at CalArts when she was a playwriting MFA student over there. Anyway, all right. So I think it's a really, yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
I know I just spoke, so I kind of hesitate, but
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, you know, through CATA, over the last two ConFests, which ends up now being 6+ years, we've had think tanks where we've brought Black theater commons, Latinx theater commons, Native Indigenous, Native Hawaiian folks, and of course our CATA folks to the table together to think about our mutual sustainability. And those relationships, there's a core group of us, those relationships continue to build. To build coalition, you want to build trust, and you just have to keep building your relationships. And then it starts to become clear how you can help each other, what's needed from all the different vantage points, right, of their lived experience, as well as this history in this country, but history in the American theater too. So we've been working to build those relationships, and we continue to support our initiatives going forward. In fact, we have a survey that we encourage all of our BIPOC communities, you know, folks of the global majority in the American theater, to fill it out. We'll have part 2 coming out this spring anytime now. I believe it's actually end of April, early May. And please fill that out, because one of the things that we're finding is a lot of folks do surveys and we fill them out, and then they have all that information and data, and we don't get to use it to raise our own resources. So we thought, what if we come out with a survey to get the impact on COVID so that we can distribute that to us, and any of you can use that info as you need to garner the resources from funders and other maybe federal, city, or state entities as well. So just know that when that survey comes out soon, we'll be announcing, please fill it out. That's one way we build solidarity and coalition. And just look for our national, actually, it's more of a Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Native, Indigenous, and Latino community coalition to continue to build towards our sustainability. One of the things I'm passionate about is healthcare and retirement. Most of our folks don't get enough weeks in the unions or earn enough money. So they're trying to take other jobs and piece it together and to be able to have affordable healthcare. And then many of our leaders can't retire with dignity. And that just always gets me in a deep place. So we're working on strategies for mutual need and mutual support.
Yeah, I think, you know, Jose Luis actually mentioned it earlier, and I will have him speak about it more. That, you know, the Latino community, the Asian community, the Black community, the Indigenous community. I mean, we all share whatever is happening. The hatred was, I mean, I know that the hatred right now is highlighted towards AAPI community, but it's an ongoing thing through history. And you know, we are allies. I mean, every BIPOC community is actually, you know, have this shared experience. And I know, Jose Luis, it's one of the things that you know, why you wanted this conversation is because, you know, even Latinos obviously had their own struggles, and now this is happening. Do you want to expand on that a little bit more before we go to the next question?
I just want to say, you know, that the same that the Latino Theater Company felt that, like I say, to show support, but in an active way. And with that, it's very important for our community to understand where the Asian community is right now, and being able to activate themselves and support and donations in any way that we can as a community, because I always, you know, I mean, when the shooting in El Paso happened last year, I remember I was as horrified, and I was the same feeling when your shooting happened, because I felt like, oh my God, the community retreats, the community feels terrorized, the community feels hurt. It's a lot of wound in the community, it's a lot of healing that needs to happen, it's a lot of protection that needs to happen. So, you know, the reason of beginning the conversation with you guys is to help us, you know, and give us as much as you're doing information so we can hopefully, do active supporting, to the community.
Thank you. Ivan, what was the follow-up question?
While we're reading it, I just want to kind of echo some of the things that.
Yes, please.
The first thing is in terms of what folks can do. I do think dropping a line and checking in means a lot, right? And I think doing it in a way that if someone responds, great. If they don't respond to you, that is, know that they took it to heart and they may respond when they've had a little bit more time. But I think it means a lot to get a text, to get an email, to get a little bit of a message that says, hey, just thinking of you and I'm here. I think, that's what, personally I try to do when our friends are in situations like Jose Luis was talking about, the El Paso shooting. I think that is one thing. The other thing is we are in this period where we need to do more than to just put out generic statements, right? They need to be taught rather than a statement. This is again just a personal thing. I would rather you just list out one action item and something, a timeline or some way that you're going to hold yourself accountable, right? And it could just mean we're checking in with the Asian American artists that have worked with our theater, in the next 30 days. But I just think something that is an action, that has a timeline and accountability also will go a long way. I think what has been certainly heartening in the last week is to see all of the our organizations are so diverse, and I think we pride ourselves on being a home to a diverse array of artists, right? So that none of our organizations, East West Players, is not just a home for Asian American artists. I hope it's a home for, Black artists and Indigenous and Latino artists. And also there's a lot of white allies, right, who work at our theaters. And I think it means a lot when those folks who have worked at our organizations also speak up and say something, publicly. In terms of the theaters, though, I will have to say, as Leslie mentioned, some folks did reach out. A lot of it has been very silent, and a lot of the weight has also been about the Asian Americans at those theaters who have had to kind of do the lifting or the work, right? They're the ones who are mobilizing, which is great, but they're also hurting, and it would be great for others to help in this moment and pick up the mantle. What I will say to our colleagues is don't send an email or a text or a call in this time and say, how can I help? And then we tell you, and then we never hear from you again, and we don't see anything, right? You don't even have to tell us, respond if we start to, but that you ask us and we tell you, right? These are the ways, and then it's silence. That is also damage, right? And that is actually, it's better you just don't at that moment. So I just think there's a number of ways folks can support, and then paramount in this moment, the ways folks can support is they can go to our websites and they can go to our social media and they can join the conversations that each of our organizations is having, right? If you want to support us, now more than ever, it's easier to go to a reading from Artists of Play or Playwrights Arena or an East West Players show. All you have to do is open your laptop and type in our web addresses. How many of you are actually doing that? Because that, more than to any of us, it means a whole heck of a lot to our artists, right? Especially in this moment. So I just think it's very simple, easy things. I hope when we all open, yes, you will come to our venues and support us. But I just think in this moment, there actually are some very easy ways for folks to engage that they're not, you know what I mean? That they're not yet at a critical mass level. I think there are folks who are doing it, and we want to thank them, but there's still a lot of silence.
Fantastic. I think the question that's actually on here is already, your response is already responding to to this question of what people can do, and I think that's really something that is actionable, and it's so simple, right? It's a very simple act, and yet as long as there's a follow through. I mean, I remember my friend Jessica Kubzansky would say something to me, and she says, "Oh, I'm gonna talk to Gary, and I'm gonna do this, and then I'm gonna talk to the meeting next week." And I'm like, okay, that'll be great. And everything that she said actually happened. She did exactly what I'm going to talk to Gary, and then at the meeting, I'm going to talk about this, and I'm going to say that we should have done this earlier. And so there's a lot of that kind of simple act that I feel like really just gives me hope, especially for a white artistic director. I mean, obviously she's an ally. She's worked with Leslie. She's worked with everybody in this room. That she really believes in supporting us. So when somebody like her would say something to me, I'm like, okay. But when I actually see it happen, like Snehal said, when it actually happens and they do it, there is something really valuable about that. And I think that a lot of people can take that and say, oh, okay, here are my plans, and it's a very simple thing, and I'm going to make sure that it happens. And I think that means a lot. Ivan, what was the next question you have? With regard to today's announcements regarding LASA, what steps can we take moving forward to build an organization that serves LA theater in a better way for all? It's a big question, and I know a lot of the BIPOC artistic directors had a meeting today talking about this, and I know separate of that, individually, we're all been talking. We've been talking to artists. We've been talking to just about everybody. I mean, I know the 5 people in this call right now, all their phones and all their emails have been buzzing for the last 4 or 5 days. But does anyone want to take a stab at this, answering this? Maybe Stephanie, do you want us to take a stab at this first, and then other people can respond?
I mean, you hit it right. You hit the nail on the head. It's huge, right? Because, and that's part of the reason why. So LASA is the Los Angeles Stage Alliance. They were a nonprofit organization that worked to serve all of Los Angeles theater. They've been around since the mid to late 80s, I believe. So service organization means that they hosted the Ovation Awards, which was to acknowledge Los Angeles excellence in Los Angeles theater. They've had various programs over the years, like discounted LA Times advertising. They had a warehouse co-op for prop and set piece rental and storage. So over these years, LA Stage Alliance has had a monumental task to really try to serve the very diverse and spread out needs of Los Angeles theaters. And there have then been some very systemic issues that organization has dealt with in terms of equity and equality, adequate representation of theaters of color, artists of color, accessibility issues among theaters and theater artists. So those are it's huge, right? So how do you move forward from that? I mean, I think that we definitely do then need to center, equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility issues in order to see a new organization that can really service Los Angeles theaters. And I know a lot of people, and this is what others have said during meetings, and I have to agree that an organization that awards theater excellence maybe needs to be separate from an organization that serves these theaters. Because you get into potentially conflicts of interest, and you're looking at different reasons then for these two organizations, and that may help in a lot of maybe, I don't want to say simplifying, but you're able to kind of focus more on what a service organization can do. What other people have said is that there are lots of other groups that have formed because LA Stage Alliance wasn't able to provide for the LA theater. You know, there's TIPLA, and unfortunately I can't remember what that acronym stands for, but it's TPPLA, and they're an actual
Theater Producers League Los Angeles.
and you know, they're incorporated not as a nonprofit but as an advocacy organization, so they can actually legally lobby, you know, which nonprofits technically can't do. You have this other organization, you know, Alternative Theaters of Los Angeles, which has served in a different way. John had mentioned that there's another group of theater leaders of color that have been meeting, because we all have such different needs. Whoever takes on the mantle of trying to create the next service organization, they have a lot to overcome. And I wouldn't even be able to start to have recommendations of how to sometimes overcome some of those issues.
I think you've already said it earlier, that I think whatever the next service organization that's going to come up should focus on the service and not the awards. I think they should really focus on that and really, you know, and really figure out how you can serve the community at large. And I mean at large, meaning that it's very inclusive, that theaters with small budget and mid-sized budgets and large budgets are all equally respected, and voices from underserved communities, from BIPOC communities, from LGBTQ plus communities, from you know, handicapped communities, that they should all be you know, invited in and really support that, and support a service that really helps everybody. Because I think for the longest time, I think as money dwindled away from LASA, I think programs got away. And then as programs got away, the only thing that was kept was the Ovation Awards. And I think, I mean, to me, if the money was going away, then take away the Ovation Awards and figure out how to keep the service that is really helping the community. But, you know, I mean, I think the way that it happened to, I mean, the way that they have closed down or ceased operation, I think is a good step. And I think, you know, we have to find a way to create something that is, you know, that is new and that is very inclusive and supportive of all our artists.
I want to actually, okay. I just want to riff off of two things you said, John Lawrence. One, I think, you know, folks should use this time we should use this time to talk to each other, right? We should talk to each other about what our experiences were, what we are looking for, and how we can have the conversation moving forward. I think, you know what I mean? I think the thing is, we know we have a window of time right now to have a little bit more robust conversation, to take advantage of that. And then, you know, John, I also keep getting hung up on this word service, because I actually think that is where, you know, somehow an imbalance happened in terms of what, you know, suddenly it was like, I think we have to turn it in terms of not what LASA can do for us, but what are we going to do for each other, right? So instead of service, do we want to call ourselves a coalition? Do we want to build something where, you know what I mean, the weight on all of this is on all of us? Because I think LASA was struggling, you know, in terms of funding, in terms of finances and all of that. So moving forward, how are we going to say, you know, it's not about what you can do for us and we're going to pay for that, but what are we going to do for each other, and how can we support this ecosystem and lift it up? So I think, you know, it's as you were saying, I think some of it is we just need to, you know, it's the words matter that we're going to use moving forward to articulate what we want to do. And I think using this time to consider that is key. And then I think it's exactly as what Stephanie and Leslie were talking about. There's a lot of other organizations that have formed basically as workarounds to do the work that LASA wasn't. And so, you know, are there ways to bring those together, or to, and, you know, does it need to be one centralized thing? or can it be more decentralized? Because as soon as we get a centralization of, there becomes this power dynamic change. So.
You do have an interesting challenge there, having been there. In fact, being with you all.
It's so interesting that you said that, because go ahead.
Oh, I just to say, to Snehal and Stephanie's point too, to the vast diversity of Los Angeles and California. I just want to lift up, California has been one of the first states to be of the global majority, over 50% now for 7, 8, 9 years. So who are they serving anyway? And like you, to your point, Snehal, how do you serve and work together? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are also at our mark, and I just wanted to know if there was. I think some people in our call today don't really know what happened. What is LASA? What happened? What is that? Why what was this whole thing? And I think there is a correlation between the erasure of Asian American artists from the conversation that sparked this, their departure. And I think it might be interesting for some of them if we can have a little bit of a capsulized thing of how that happened. And I'm not sure if Snehal or of Stephanie would like to just give us a little bit of context of like exactly how things transpired and how it transpired so quickly literally within less than a week, So who wants to take that responsibility?
I think Stephanie did it really well.
Like, I just did this earlier.
She has it much more polished.
Okay, sure. So last Tuesday evening, the LA Stage Alliance, so they've not had a staff since last summer. Basically, the pandemic, shut down Los Angeles theater. And at some point, they furloughed their full-time and part-time staff. And then at some point later on, they let everybody go. They still decided to go forward with the Ovation Awards, which would have recognized theater productions from like summer of 2019 through the shutdown. March 2020. So on Tuesday evening at the Ovation Awards, they were being streamed online, and the fourth category of the evening was for featured actress of a play, and one of the nominated actors was Julie Lee, who was in Hannah and the Dread Gazebo, which was a co-production between the Fountain Theater and East West Players. And when they announced her name and the category, the graphic that came up on screen had Julie Lee, but it was a photo of a different Asian American actress that was in the same play. And then they pronounced Julie's first name incorrectly in the voiceover recording. So I was watching on my computer, and actually I was text messaging Julie. And when I saw that, and I was really confused, I was like, wait, that's not you. And I said, do you want me to email LA Stage Alliance? And she said, yes. So from Artists at Play, I crafted an email complaining about the situation and talked about it in the context of the Stop AAPI Hate that's been going, that is very current in our communities. And then on social media, it was also kind of taking off among other Asian American artists in the community who knew Julie. It was all over Facebook and Twitter. So people were very upset that this would happen. LA Stage Alliance issued an apology around 11 p.m. Tuesday night, but using language that said, we regret any harm this would have caused, which of course means that they're not really understanding what harm did happen and the responsibility they have over it. So then there was another round of emails from Artists at Play and another round of posts on social media about how their apology was very lackluster and missed the mark. So then Wednesday, as Wednesday goes on, we find out that there were other artists of color who had their photos incorrect, their names misspelled, their names mispronounced. And it was just kind of this growing, very growing frustration over LA Stage Alliance and no answer. And then Snehal and East West Players made their announcement in the early evening, late afternoon, where they were, and they started the hashtag Leaving LASA, and they laid out not only what was the erasure that was happening to Julie and other artists of color, but that as a theater of color, theaters of color often aren't acknowledged as the co-producers because of the way co-productions are framed in the Ovation Awards. So the two co-productions that East West Players was involved with the Pasadena Playhouse and the Fountain Theater, East West Players was not acknowledged. After Snehal's statement, other theater companies from Center Theater Group and Pasadena Playhouse, the Geffen Theater, Artists at Play did, and lots of other small theater companies joined in solidarity, announcing that they were going to be leaving LA Stage Alliance, their membership. And then Deaf West Theater shares that they had a deaf artist, sound designer, a designer who they had specifically requested for captioning or ASL interpretation of the Ovation Awards, and their requests were not met. So that shows that there are accessibility issues and just systemic issues in regards to the LA Ovation Awards and how LA Stage Alliance operates. Subsequently, LA Stage Alliance announced another acknowledgement of the failings, and they said that they would embark on, advisory boards and new committees that would bring on theater artists of color to help improve LA Stage Alliance. And at that point, I don't think anyone was interested in participating. And then, so that was Thursday, Friday, we had a lot of people still exiting. And then this morning at 2 a.m., because I checked, on the LA Stage Alliance Facebook page, they announced that the board of directors decided that they would cease operation. So that has essentially we're at the end of LA Stage Alliance. And Snehal said, there was an LA Times article that came out last Thursday that had an overview of what happened at that point. And then Snehal, you said there's more coverage, national coverage that's coming out today, tomorrow, this week?
Yeah, I mean, LA Times, just their story came out. New York Times, their story came out. Thank you to LA Magazine, KPCC, Spectrum News. So for covering it, one of the things, thank you, Stephanie. First of all, thank you and Artists at Play for leading that charge, and for kind of kicking off everything. The big thing now, right, is to watch. I don't want to say gaslighting, but there's a number of issues. It wasn't this one thing, right? It wasn't this issue. There were a number of issues with the awards, but they really crystallized, years of inequity, years of not being heard as members when we spoke up about these issues, right? So that their policy with co-production was very inconsistent. But right now, the newspaper headlines are so often reducing it to this one thing around a misidentifying Julie and also mispronouncing her name. And it's so much more than that. So I just want to, make sure that we highlight, because suddenly this feeds into a certain narrative of what BIPOC organizations and BIPOC artists are trying to do, and stuff like that. And I just want to, some of the press has been very great in some of the conversation about capturing kind of the scale and providing context, but a lot of it keeps kind of hammering home this one thing. And really, that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I think all of us on this call have spoken to LASA throughout the years, have tried to do, from within as members. We have been Ovation voters. Our organizations, yes, have received those awards, but it doesn't mean that, we haven't also been trying to bring greater equity to their work throughout.
Yeah, I also, want to point out that, in the end, it was maybe 36 theaters who actually left. There may have been more that offered statements of solidarity, but some of the statements of solidarity actually came from companies that have not been official members of the LA Stage Alliance for many years. So, let's say 36 members left. There's still over 100 or more Los Angeles theaters that would have still been members of LA Stage Alliance. And that is still a considerable number of Los Angeles theaters that could have helped and continue the organization. I mean, with the restructuring, with the examination of the Ovation Awards and of the organization, the 30, 35 of us that left, it makes a
46.
dent, but it's
46.
Okay. Oh, 40. Okay. It's not, but it's not the funds that we would have left that would no longer contribute because we no longer pay our membership dues. That's not what killed LASA, right? It's not just because some of us left. There was plenty of other LA theater that could have continued and supported the organization as is. But yes, it's representative of systemic issues that, Snehal has gone into. And so you really can't just say or blame the few of us that left or the situation over the misidentification of an actor.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to highlight, you pay to be a member. So, you know what I mean? So like you paid this organization at every step. So there was issues also around inequity about paying to have your show considered, paying, a small fee to be a voter. If it's co-productions and you both want to be noticed, you both have to pay. But you also then pay to be a general member of LA Stage Alliance. And so, at this point, we're paying to be not heard, to be reduced, to be diminished, to be ignored, to be rebuffed. And so, folks are more than welcome to stay. But, I also think there is a certain, it's taking your money back, but empowering yourself and taking power back in this situation. And those who want to stay, to me, the worry was if we stayed, the responsibility to address these issues would be on, this group of folks right here and the BIPOC organizations. And that has been a consistent theme. And so it was very important to say, we're going to step away, you assess your organization, and then, we can talk afterwards if you like.
Mm-hmm.
John's computer, it seems to be acting up, and so he'll come back. But I think all of this is so important because I think all comes to the same issue, at least from listening, of the idea that how we have to stop this idea of white supremacy. I mean, at the end of it, all of it comes the roots from that, meaning we are struggling as people of color, as the Asian community, as the African American community, the indigenous community. We have to retake our story and our narrative. And I think, Snehal, what you were saying at the end is very, very important, that LASA coming apart, or it's not because of the Asian community. That's the wrong narrative.
Mm-hmm.
LASA coming apart is because of the system, all systematic problems that had for years. So I think that's very important, that any of that, this is how we help each other. When we see that narrative, we have to push back and say that's not the right narrative to, so for the future of any organization that we have, or the future of what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I really want to thank you guys. I know what's happening with John Frost, but really want to thank you. There is more things that we need to do. Thank you for all the information. Thank you for giving us all the advice of what we need to do. And we will continue. We as always will stay in touch and do more work that it needs to bring our communities together.
Mm.
Thank you, Jose Luis.
Jose Luis. We have long history with the Latinx community. We won't stop here. We keep going, working together.
That's right.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody, and have a wonderful day. Please.
Be well, be safe. Support each other. Support AAPI businesses. and Latinx businesses too. Yes.
That's right. Thank you.